Another day, another Trails title down. I first played Cold Steel 1 a couple of months ago, and since then there's been no looking back. This series is quickly becoming one of my favourite RPG series ever. There's no doubting that playing all of the titles from the Sky, Crossbell and Cold Steel arcs is a huge time investment, but so far it has been totally worth it. The Trails of Cold Steel 2 is no exception. It picks up right where the first Cold Steel concluded. All of the many characters and the story events are directly related to the first in the series, and for this reason I highly recommend playing Cold Steel 1 first. Before we begin, if you like this review, it would help out a lot if you hit like and subbed for more RPG and Trails content. With that out of the way, let's get into what makes Trails of Cold Steel 2 so great. The story and the characters are the most important part of an RPG for me, and this is where the Trails series shines. The Cold Steel series is set in the Erebonian Empire, a country that has recently been on edge not only due to the internal conflicts but also due to the threat of war with surrounding nations. The first game concluded on a cliffhanger, and Cold Steel 2 picks up right where things left off. The main character Reen wakes up next to his giant mech, the Divine Knight Velimir, clueless as to where he is or what to do next. A huge focus of Cold Steel 1 was the world building. It spent a lot of time establishing the Erebonian Empire, its politics and the major faces and forces driving the conflicts. With this already established, Cold Steel 2's focus shifts to the internal war between the Noble Alliance and the Imperial Army. Story progression is a lot different this time around. Early in the game, you'll acquire an airship that allows you to instantly travel to certain locations. The majority of the cities, fields and dungeons that you'll visit will be the exact same as those from Cold Steel 1, so there are very few surprises in terms of fresh, varying locations. Initially, the focus will be travelling around the country, reuniting with your lost classmates who have all been scattered around the world thanks to the war. Finding your favourite characters, reuniting with them and learning what they've all been up to during these tough times was great to experience. This is something that's just not possible if you haven't played the first Cold Steel game. Once the students of Class 7 are all back together, the story shifts to taking part in the war, with the class fighting to undo the wrongs caused by the increasing conflict between the nobles and Imperial Army. I had some massive Suikoden feels while playing through Cold Steel 2. For much of the game, your headquarters is on an airship, and through travelling around recruiting fellow students from different classes, they'll join you and add some sort of feature to your base. For instance, recruiting Monk will allow you to play the lottery, and recruiting Nicholas will open up an ingredient store. This is all well and good in theory, but it didn't take long for this process to become a drag. Of course, no student will say, "Hey Reen, how are you mate? I'll help you out." Nope, they all have some trivial little problem that you'll need to solve first. I think this aspect of the game could have taken some serious tips from the Suikoden playbook.
What the? How? Yeah!
Reen?
Die. Whoa. He's a monster.
In terms of pacing, overall I felt that Cold Steel 2 was an improvement over Cold Steel 1, which was often slowed down by loads of forced generic side quests and a plot that took a long time to get going. With that said, Cold Steel 2 is still a slow burner, particularly at the start of the game, but this slower style of storytelling is something that I'm getting used to with the Trails games. Just like in the first game, there are times when Reen and Class 7 don't have anything to do except for Netflix and chill, without the Netflix, or the chill. During this downtime, bonding scenes make a return. Here you can select some classmates to talk to, and this will further teach you about their complex lives and backstories. This will also increase Reen's bonding level with them and ultimately provide a unique scene at the end of the game based on who you have chosen to bond with the most. My girl Alyssa, she's where it's at. If you've played the game, which character did you form the greatest bond with? Let me know in the comments. With the slow crawling plot aside, Cold Steel 2 is a long game, and there were still many moments of greatness with some insane twists and turns, which is, like I said, the best thing about the Trails games. The soundtrack is also worth a mention. It's awesome and really helps enhance the atmosphere of the world, the epic battles and the key scenes. But I think the best thing for me were the moments that allowed the great cast of characters to shine. I grew to love Class 7 and the supporting cast of Cold Steel 1, and this time around every one of them has their time in the spotlight. This creates some seriously cool fist-pumping moments, particularly when characters just pop in the most unexpected of times. The main scenes are presented with a great cast of voice actors too, and these voice scenes are so much more engaging than those with just text. There is an insane amount of dialogue, but I thought the proportion of voice to non-voice scenes was really good. However, I hated the scenes that had a mix of both. For instance, you may have several lines of fully voiced dialogue followed by a line from a character with no voice at all. This was so disappointing as it removed me from being completely absorbed into these moments. It didn't happen too often, but it was still very noticeable. Still, if there's any reason to play through the Trails games, it's for the incredible world building, the well-written story, and the lovable, memorable cast of characters.
Come on, there's no need to be so on guard. We just want to enjoy our long-awaited reunion with an old friend and comrade. How about you, Fee? Miss us?
You're the same as ever. Although, if you keep using traps to kick off reunion parties, you won't have any friends left before long.
Ah, don't be like that. That's just my way of saying hi.
In terms of gameplay, you can expect a very similar experience to that of Cold Steel 1. The same rules apply in battle. This turn-based system places your 4 main characters up against a group of enemies. You can attack, spend EP on magical arts, or CP on unique character crafts. Then there's the super powerful S-craft, which consumes all of your CP but does loads of damage. Finally, there's link attacks, which provides different benefits depending on which characters you have paired up. Cold Steel 2 takes this core system we experienced from the previous game and adds some nice additions that gives you quite a bit more to think about. First, we have Reen's new abilities. He can now spend 100 CP to perform Spirit Unification, which not only boosts his stats for a few turns, but also gives him access to new crafts. Reen can also spend 500 EP to summon his Divine Knight in battle. The other new addition is the Overdrive gauge. When it's full, you can choose a pair of Lint characters to unleash 3 turns in a row. On top of the core mechanics from the original game, these new additions provide a lot more to think about in terms of how and when to use them. Cold Steel's 2 combat system really is awesome, and on paper it's one of the better turn-based systems that I've played in a while. Now, I say on paper because there is one major issue here, which for me was the game's biggest problem. You are given loads of options to customize your character, but it doesn't take too long to create builds that make you absolutely unstoppable. The balance here is horrible. From around the halfway point until the end of the game, I was defeating just about every boss in 1 or 2 turns without taking any damage at all. That is not to say the bosses are statistically weak, that is far from the truth. In fact, without abusing certain builds, they will still do a lot of damage to you, potentially making for some great battles. During the first quarter of the game, before I turned into a powerhouse, I fought some very enjoyable battles that required me to use the mechanics wisely and think about everything. The lack of balance here holds the game back, and if Cold Steel 2 had addressed this, the overall experience would have been taken to the next level. The RPG mechanics in terms of building your characters also work the same as the original. You'll obtain a load of quartz throughout the game, and each character can equip 8 of these at a time. There are loads of different quartz to acquire, and they'll provide you with arts to use in battle, stat increases, status attacks, and other passive bonuses. The only real difference here is that each slot can be upgraded to level 1 or 2, which is a requirement for equipping the rare or super rare quartz. Due to the very impressive variety of different quartz, there are loads of builds to tinker with, and this was a lot of fun. But like I said, there were certain quartz that were overly powerful, and I didn't really feel the need to experiment as much as I would have liked to. Aside from the regular battles, there will be times that Reen can jump into his Divine Knight and participate in giant mecha fights. These battles only pop up through story events, and the mechanics here are fairly simple. The strategy here comes from choosing the most effective body part to attack on the enemy based on their current stance. This ultimately comes down to trial and error. If a certain attack proves to be ineffective, then try something different next time. The other members of Class 7 play a supporting role here. On their turn, you can choose to heal HP, EP, or activate a unique supporting ability, which is usually a buff or debuff. These battles work well enough and are never too challenging, since you can basically heal whenever the supporting character has a turn. I think the biggest thing holding this whole system back was the lack of customization options for Velimir. You can equip 3 quartz, which will increase stats, but that's it. Some more depth here would have been nice. I've said it before, but here we go again. Where has this series been my whole life? The good news is that from the look of things, like myself, more and more people seem to be getting on board the Trails train. I couldn't have asked for much more from the second title in the Cold Steel arc. The first game did such an amazing job establishing the world, the characters, and the epic story, and at times, Cold Steel 2 takes things to a new level. While a little slow to get going, the game makes up for it with countless amazing moments featuring the strong cast of characters that we've grown to love. The soundtrack also has some absolute rippers that drive home these key moments to perfection. direction. The combat system takes a logical step forward with some great new features that add a lot of new strategic options, but for me, Cold Steel 2's biggest problem was the balance. It is far too easy to become absolutely overpowered to the point that you can kill most bosses without getting hit. What did you think of Cold Steel 2, and do you think it was better than the first? Let me know in the comments. With only 3 Trails games down, my journey is still only just beginning. Before I start Cold Steel 3 and 4, I'm going to finish the Sky series and then the Crossbell arc, so stay tuned for that. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. It would help out heaps if you hit like and sub for more RPG and Trails content. Also, come say hi on the socials. I don't bite much. See you next time.